The cold didn't come from the hardwood floor pressing against my cheek. It came from the silence. A thick, purposeful silence where my father's laughter, the rustle of his newspaper, should have been. Instead, there was only the sharp, final rip of packing tape and the merciless scrape of cardboard on wood. I walked into the living room, and the scene in front of me froze the air in my lungs. My mother, Eleanor, was calmly folding my dad's old wool sweater, the one he wore every Christmas, and dropping it into a box marked donations. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were dry and focused, as if she were cleaning up an inconvenient mess, not the memories of the man she'd been married to for 20 years. Next to her was Richard, the man who was now officially my stepfather. He moved with a brutal efficiency, sealing a box of my dad's books. He glanced at me, a fleeting look not of sympathy but of annoyance. "Maya," my mum said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, "we're just clearing things out." "Clearing things out," I stammered, the words catching in my throat. Dad's only been gone a week." Richard stopped, the roll of tape in his hand creating a sudden heavy silence. "The world moves on, Maya. Adapt, or you'll be left behind like outdated software." Outdated software. That's what I was to him. What everything of my dad's was. My mind, the mind of a second-year computer science major, started to coldly analyse the situation. This wasn't cleaning. This was a data wipe, a forced system reboot, and I was a corrupted file about to be deleted. My mother stood, brushing an imaginary piece of dust from her expensive yoga pants. "We're not running a charity, Maya. Sometimes you have to reset what's broken." She looked right at me then, and for the first time I saw not grief, but a chilling, steely resolve. "You'll be staying with your Aunt Cynthia for a while. It's time for all of us to have a fresh start." "A fresh start," I repeated, my voice trembling, "by erasing him." They didn't answer. The answer was in the boxes, in the silence, in the way they avoided my eyes. When they weren't looking, while Richard was hauling a stack of boxes outside, I slipped into my dad's old office. The smell of his pipe tobacco and old paper still lingered. I moved fast, a final desperate data backup. His old battered laptop, the one that held all his projects, his code, his soul. I slid it gently into my backpack. On his desk, under a pile of bills, was his worn Timex watch. I closed my hand around it. The metal was strangely warm. When I returned, a suitcase was waiting by the door. "Aunt Cynthia is expecting you," my mother said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I grabbed the suitcase, slung the backpack over my shoulder. As I walked through the door, I didn't look back. The house where I grew up, filled with my dad's laughter and his lessons on coding, was now just an empty shell. They had erased him, and now they were erasing me. I was an orphan, not of death, but of choice. Their choice. The drive to Aunt Cynthia's was a silent blur of manicured lawns and identical soulless houses. The kind of neighbourhood where bad things didn't happen, they were just hidden better. When we pulled up to her sprawling brick house, a perfect fortress with pristine white columns, I knew this wasn't a refuge. It was a different kind of prison. Aunt Cynthia greeted me on the circular driveway with a kiss that didn't touch my cheek, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maya, darling, we are so thrilled to have you." Her voice was high-pitched and performative. Before I could even set my suitcase down, she pressed a glossy folder into my hands. "Just a little welcome packet to help you get settled in." I opened it. It wasn't a welcome packet. It was a list of house rules, a chore schedule, and at the very back, a single professionally printed page, a rental agreement. The word rent hit me harder than the front door shutting behind me. "Welcome to the family," Cynthia said, her smile tightening. "Rent is due on the 1st of the month." My cousins, Kyle and Jessica, watched from the top of the grand staircase, identical smirks on their faces. "Looks like we got a freeloader," Kyle muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Jessica just snickered, already typing furiously on her phone, probably posting a picture of my worn-out sneakers to her friends. The days that followed were a masterclass in quiet humiliation. Every meal was a silent performance at a dining table that could seat 20. Every chore I did was inspected. Every move I made was monitored. The pretense of family was a thin, brittle veneer over a core of cold, hard transaction. The breaking point came faster than I could have imagined. At the end of the first week, I checked my bank account. A $500 charge was pending. The description simply read, "Household Contribution Fee." It was more than half of what I had left in the world. My heart hammered against my ribs. I found Cynthia in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a vase with surgical precision. I held up my phone, my hand shaking slightly. "Aunt Cynthia, what is this charge?" She glanced at my screen, then back at her flowers, a bored expression on her face. "Oh, that! Utilities, food, use of the facilities. It all adds up, dear." $500 for 1 week? My voice was barely a whisper. That's not fair." She finally turned to look at me, and the mask of the gracious hostess fell away, revealing something cold and sharp beneath. She scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "Fair? You think you deserve a free ride? My children don't even get a free ride in this house." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "This is the real world, Maya. You pay your way or you get out. There's no room for freeloaders here." The word hung in the air between us. Freeloader. The same word her son had used. It was their script. "I don't have it," I said, my throat tight. "My mom, she said you would help me." "And I am," Cynthia said, her smile returning. "But it was all teeth now. I'm teaching you a valuable lesson about responsibility." She turned back to her flowers, dismissing me completely. "Pay up or pack your bags. Your choice." There was no choice, not really. That night, under the cold, judging eyes of my aunt, I packed the same suitcase I had arrived with. I was being erased all over again. Being kicked out of my aunt's house felt less like a tragedy and more like an inevitability. The real world, as Cynthia called it, was the back of my dad's old Subaru. The seats still smelled faintly of him, a mix of motor oil and peppermint lifesavers. It was the only comfort in a world that had suddenly run out of it. The Wisconsin winter was a cruel, relentless beast. The cold wasn't just in the air, it crawled under the doors of the car, seeped through my 3 layers of clothing and settled deep in my bones. I parked behind a 24-hour laundromat owned by a man my dad used to know, Uncle Sam. The warm, humid air that vented from the dryers was my only source of heat for a few hours each night. My life became a grim routine. I'd use the laundromat's bathroom to wash up in the mornings, then head to my classes at the community college, trying to look like a normal student and not someone who had slept curled up in a freezing car. After class, I worked a miserable part-time shift at a discount grocery store, stocking shelves for minimum wage. Every dollar was precious, spent on gas to keep the car heater running for a few minutes at a time, or on cheap vending machine crackers that served as dinner. The isolation was a physical weight. My texts to my mother went unanswered. My so-called family had successfully firewalled me from my own life. My body started to fail. A persistent cough became my constant companion, a dry, racking sound that echoed in the small space of the car. It soon blossomed into a fever that left me dizzy and shivering even under a pile of blankets. I missed a shift at the store, then another. The phone call was brief. I was fired. That night was the worst. The temperature plummeted. My cough was a raw fire in my chest, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. I was running on empty. My internal monologue, the part of me that always thought in code, was just a string of error messages. System failure. All resources critical. Running on emergency power. I must have passed out. I woke to a sharp, insistent tapping on the passenger window. My heart leapt into my throat. Police, or worse, Cynthia. I squinted through the frost-caked glass. A man's silhouette stood against the harsh glare of the laundromat's security light. He tapped again, harder this time. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers numb and clumsy. The door opened with a groan. It was Uncle Sam. His face, usually kind and crinkled with smile lines, was a mask of shock and fury. "Maya," he said, his voice thick with disbelief. He didn't wait for an answer. "My God!" He looked from my pale face to the nest of blankets in the back seat, to the empty cracker wrappers on the floor. His eyes, full of a sorrowful anger, finally met mine. "Get in the warmth," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Now." He helped me out of the car, my legs buckling under me. He half carried me through the back door of the laundromat and up a flight of rickety stairs I never knew existed. He unlocked a door and guided me into a small, simple apartment. It wasn't much, but it was warm. It was safe. As he sat me down on a worn-out sofa and wrapped a thick blanket around my shoulders, the last of my strength gave out. For the first time since my dad died, I let myself cry. The next few days passed in a feverish blur of antibiotics, hot soup, and the blessed uninterrupted silence of a room with 4 solid walls. Sam's apartment was small, a simple studio above the hum of the washers and dryers, but to me it was a palace. He was a quiet, gentle man who moved with a sad sort of patience. He didn't ask too many questions. He just made sure I ate, that I took my medicine, that I slept. Once the fever broke and the world stopped spinning, a different kind of fire started to burn inside me. Not the fire of illness, but the slow, simmering heat of rage. One evening, as I was helping him fold towels in the back office, Sam finally spoke about what was really on his mind. He sighed, setting down a stack of clean laundry. "Your father, he was the smartest man I ever knew, honest to a fault." He paused, looking at me with his kind, weary eyes. He always used to say, "Trust the numbers, Sam, they don't lie." He walked over to an old metal filing cabinet and pulled out a dusty ledger. "Lately," he said, his voice dropping, "Cynthia's numbers are lying." My head snapped up. "She helps manage the books for this place," he explained. "A family favour, but the profits, they don't add up. Things go missing. Small amounts here and there, but it's been happening for years." He placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture so paternal it made my throat ache. "I'm just an old man with a laundromat, Maya. I don't understand all these new computer spreadsheets she uses, but your dad taught you. Can you take a look for me? It wasn't a request, it was a key, a weapon. He was giving me access to the one place where the truth couldn't be hidden, the data." That night I sat in his small office, my dad's old laptop humming to life. The laundromat's accounting software was outdated, but the raw data was all there. I started digging. The next few hours were a frantic, focused montage of clicks and keystrokes. I cross-referenced dates, traced transfers, and followed digital breadcrumbs. It started with small discrepancies, just as Sam had said. But then I found it, a hidden folder, a series of encrypted files. It wasn't just the laundromat. Cynthia and Richard had set up a series of shell companies. They were siphoning money, not just from Sam, but from trust funds, birthday money, college accounts, my cousin's college accounts, Kyle's, Jessica's. They had been systematically robbing their own children blind. The final damning proof was a series of wire transfers from my own trust fund, the one I wasn't supposed to be able to touch until I was 25, rerouted to one of their offshore accounts. The next day, armed with printouts, Sam and I went to the lion's den. We found Kyle and Jessica in the living room of Cynthia's mansion, scrolling listlessly through their phones. Sam cleared his throat. "We need to talk to you both." Kyle looked up, annoyed. "If this is about Maya again, we're not interested." I stepped forward and laid a single piece of paper on the coffee table in front of him. It was a bank statement from his college fund. The balance at the bottom read $14.32. Kyle stared at it, his face slowly losing its colour. What is this? This is fake." "It's not," I said, my voice steady. I placed another statement down. This one was Jessica's. Her balance was even lower. "Your mother and my stepfather. They took it all." I watched the arrogance drain from their faces, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. The smirks were gone. The casual cruelty vanished. In its place was the raw, ugly shock of betrayal. Kyle looked from the paper to me, his voice shaking with a rage I'd never heard from him before. "She took it all," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. That was my future." Jessica just stared, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, I wasn't looking at my tormentors. I was looking at fellow victims. I met Sam's gaze across the room. The alliance was formed. My voice was cold and determined, a stranger in my own ears. "They're throwing a party next week to celebrate Kyle's 18th birthday. A party to celebrate a future they stole." I looked at my new, unlikely allies. "We're going to give them a party they'll never forget." The night of Kyle's 18th birthday party was a grotesque spectacle of stolen wealth. Imported chandeliers dripped crystals from the ceiling of Cynthia's marble-floored foyer. Waiters circulated with silver platters of champagne and caviar. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the sound of fake laughter. It was a monument to a life built on lies, and we were about to tear it down. I stood in a corner, invisible in a simple black dress, my heart a steady, cold drum against my ribs. Kyle and Jessica moved through the party like ghosts, their faces pale masks of forced pleasantries. Sam stood by the main doorway, a silent, grim-faced sentinel. In my pocket, my phone felt heavy, a small, dense brick of digital dynamite. My mother and Richard made their grand entrance, all smiles and air kisses. Eleanor's diamond bracelet glittered as she hugged Cynthia. "You've done such a wonderful job," she gushed. "It's all about family, isn't it?" The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Finally the moment came. Cynthia tapped a champagne flute with a manicured nail, calling for silence. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to her as she stood by the massive flat-screen TV that was currently displaying a slideshow of Kyle's childhood photos. "I just want to thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "To celebrate my wonderful son Kyle, and to celebrate what truly matters in this life." She raised her glass. "To family." The guests raised their glasses in unison. "To family," they echoed. As they drank, I looked at Kyle. He gave me a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. That was the signal. I looked down at my phone at the single red button on the custom app I'd built. My thumb hovered over it. I took a deep breath. I tapped the screen. The slideshow of smiling baby photos behind Cynthia flickered and died. For a second the screen was black. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Then it lit up again, not with photos, but with the crisp official logo of an offshore bank. A collective gasp went through the room. The screen changed, displaying a bank statement with Richard's name on it, showing a balance with far too many zeros. It switched again. A wire transfer confirmation, moving money from Jessica's college fund into a shell corporation. Then another, and another. Spreadsheets, hidden ledgers, damning email exchanges, a torrent of their secrets, projected 10 feet high for everyone to see. The final slide was a short audio file. Jessica had recorded it. Cynthia's voice filled the silent, horrified room, laughing. "He's so clueless," her voice sneered from the speakers. "Sam has no idea. By the time he figures it out, we'll be long gone." Cynthia stood frozen, her face a rictus of horror. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Richard lunged for the power cord, but it was too late. The damage was done. "What is the meaning of this?" he sputtered, his face beet red. "It means the party's over," Kyle said, his voice ringing with a newfound strength. He and Jessica walked to the front of the room to stand beside me. "You didn't just steal our money," Jessica said, her voice clear and unwavering, all traces of the spoiled teenager gone. "You stole our chances, our dreams." Just then the grand front doors swung open. 2 men and a woman in dark, official-looking suits stepped inside. The lead agent held up a badge. "Cynthia Williams? Richard Miller?" she said, her voice calm and authoritative. "It seems your system has a fatal error." She glanced at the screen, then back at them. "You're under arrest." Chaos erupted as the agents moved forward, clicking handcuffs shut around Cynthia's and Richard's wrists. I saw my mother, Eleanor, sink into an armchair, her face ashen. Her involvement, her complicity, was all there in the bank records. She was next. I felt a quiet finality settle over me. I looked at my mother as an agent approached her. Her eyes met mine, pleading. I just gave her a small, sad shake of my head. "You chose to reset," I said, my voice barely a whisper, meant only for her. "This is my reset." A year later, the neon sign for the Parker Mills family enterprise glowed steadily against the evening sky. Inside, the hum of the dryers was a comforting bass line to the sound of our new life. Kyle, his hands clean but forever carrying the ghost of machine grease, was showing a new hire how to fix a faulty belt. Jessica was on the phone, her voice confident and sharp as she negotiated a deal for a new delivery van. I stood at the counter reconciling the day's receipts. The numbers were perfect, honest. Sam walked up, placing a steaming mug of coffee beside me. "Your father would be proud, Maya," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. "Not just for this," he gestured around the bustling laundromat, "but for who you've become." Just then, the bell above the door chimed. My mother, Eleanor, stood there looking hesitant and frail. It was the first time she'd come back since her release. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a universe of regret. "Maya," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the machines. "I'm so sorry." I met her gaze, holding it for a long moment. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't offer anger. I just gave her the quiet truth. "I have to get back to work," I said, my voice soft but firm. As I watched her leave, I felt nothing but quiet finality. The past was a closed file. I turned back to my books, back to my family, back to the life we had built from the ashes. We were a strange, broken little group, brought together by betrayal. But looking at Kyle and Jessica laughing across the room, at Sam watching over us like a proud father, I knew this was real. We had taken their broken system and written our own code, a better one. My story started with an erasure, an attempt to delete me from my own life. They tried to break my spirit, to convince me I was a bug in their perfect system. But they forgot one thing about code. Sometimes the most broken pieces can be rewritten into something stronger, more resilient, and impossible to delete. I learned that family isn't always about the blood you share. Sometimes it's about the battles you share, the trust you build, and the future you fight for together. It's about finding the people who see your worth, even when you're at rock bottom. So now I want to ask you, have you ever had to rewrite your own story? Have you ever found your true family in the most unexpected of places? Share your experience in the comments below, because every story of survival deserves to be heard, and every person who has ever felt broken deserves to know they are not alone. Thank you for listening.